I'm super excited to welcome you to the very first episode of the JP Show. So, this came about, and I'm going to keep this really quick and simple. This came about with a conversation I had with a coach that I work with. I've been working with coaches for starting in my fifth. I don't know. It's been 4 years. I'm pretty sure it's been 4 years. And one of my coaches and we came up with this idea, and I've been sitting on it for a while because I was waiting for it to be perfect. And I realized today as I was driving home, I was like, you know what? It's time to do it. So I've got something really cool to share with you guys today, a podcast I'm listening to, uh, some NLP stuff, and some really cool things that can apply to life and business, and especially marketing. And so if you're watching this on one of my more DIY crafty places, this stuff totally relates to that. And what I'm going to share today can make you a better marketer, a better teacher, and better in life. So let's go ahead and get started. Thank you guys so much for being here. I'm just going to grab my notes real quick and make sure that I stay on task. So I recently finished up all of the tasks needed for my certification in neurolinguistic programming, and it's a discipline of psychology. I've taken the certification course a couple times and finally finished all the steps to get my certificate. Hopefully it's coming in the mail soon. But one of the things that we learn in NLP are these things called presuppositions. And they are these ideas that help us, convenient assumptions that we can make that help us communicate better with people and better understand the people around us. And one of the presuppositions that I've learned, and it makes sense cognitively, right? But I've had trouble working on, is respecting the other person's model of the world. So, this NLP presupposition is respect the other person's model of the world. Now, have you ever been in an argument with somebody and you're like so convinced that you're right, right? And you're like, they're wrong. And especially this happens with kids, right? I remember being a little kid and I would be, although I've done this as an adult too. And I'd be like, they're wrong. They did this, blah, blah, blah. But then that other kid is totally sure that they are right as well. Right. And so they're like, that other kid is wrong and blah, blah, blah. And this is where we get arguments that happen. And what I've noticed over time as I have started trying to do this more is maybe it doesn't prevent the argument, but it at least gives me a little bit more understanding of the other person. So I'm going to share why this came up in my mind today. I started listening to this podcast, and then I'll give you guys some real actionable stuff that you can do with this information. So I was listening to this new podcast on Spotify. It's new to me. It's been around for a while. It's called Heavyweight. And I started listening to the very first episode, and it's about these two men, Buzz and Sheldon. The episode is called Buzz. And I'm listening to it on Spotify if you guys want to go check it out. But I think it's everywhere. It's called Heavyweight. And Buzz is 80 years old, and Sheldon, his brother, is 85. And for over half their lives, they have been at odds with each other. They don't like each other. They won't visit with each other. And they're absolutely convinced that the other one is wrong. And as I was listening to this podcast episode, I was like, oh my gosh, if only they knew that if only they were respecting the other person's model of the world, this whole argument would have gone away. And so as they're going in this podcast, the son of Buzz is kind of trying to facilitate these two guys getting back together and rekindling their brotherhood, I guess, rekindling the relationship. It comes out that Buzz had this idea that his brother Sheldon was the favorite. And Sheldon is like, no, like my experience was I was going through this really tough stuff growing up, and that's why like mom did this with me and grandma did this with me and didn't do that with you, because they were dealing with my situation. And so they each had a really different view of their childhood, a really different view of these events that went on. They were in a home that sounded really like it was in some turmoil, and the kids ended up being split up. And so they both had a lot of resentments about this that they carried not only into their childhood, not only into early adulthood, but all the way to They're now 80 and 85. And having the realization that, oh my gosh, if only we had been respecting the other person's model of the world, even enough to ask about it, we could have had a relationship all these years, right? And such a tough story to hear. But what resonated for me throughout that was that it was more important for them to be right than to understand the other person, right? It was more important for Buzz's story to be true for him and for him to be right about it than for him to have any understanding of Sheldon, and to be humble and step aside and say, you know what? Uh, help me understand this, right? I don't know why we're even arguing, right? Instead, they would trigger each other and then immediately get back into, I'm right, you're wrong. And the same with Sheldon, right? And so they were so busy trying to be right all the time and making the other wrong that they missed out on over half their lives worth of relationships. So you might be wondering, well, okay, that's a great story, but how does this relate to marketing, business, and that kind of thing? And of course, we can see how that applies in our lives, right? We've gotten in an argument with somebody, we have a disagreement. It's pretty obvious. Most people are reasonable. Most people are somewhat intelligent, right? You might want to debate that. But if we see a situation, right, we watch a movie, right, we can look at it and go, okay, that's what the story was, blah blah blah. But when we have our own experience, sometimes it's really hard to see that the other person might have a different experience, and that just because their experience is different than ours doesn't mean that mine is right and theirs is wrong, or theirs is right and mine is wrong. They're both valid. That's what respecting somebody else's model of the world means. And so when we're doing business stuff and when we're doing marketing stuff, it's really, really important for us to know this. And so there's two ways I want to share this with you. One is there are simple ways that this can show up, really simple, really basic ways that you can use right now. And then there are a little bit deeper, more complex ways that uh, using this NLP presupposition of respecting the other person's model of the world and recognizing your own need to be right slash needing to make other people wrong so that you're right, how that shows up in marketing, how that shows up in business, and kind of defeats you. And the reason I can share about this is because this is very much my own journey. I have a lot of need to be right. And I've been working on letting that go. And I definitely did not respect other people's models of the world for much of my life until I started having some changes and challenges and realizations later on. And what I noticed is that as I've learned these things, it has absolutely influenced the way I market my business, the way I run my business, the way I teach, um, the way I coach, the way that I'm a parent, the way that I'm a friend, like all these areas in my life. And so I'm going to share that with you. So, first, simple ways that this can be useful for you in business or marketing. So if you are a blogger or you have a website or you sell products or any of those kind of things, you have a YouTube channel, you are absolutely participating in SEO, search engine optimization. If you're not, you probably don't have very much business going on because nobody can find you. And especially if you're on Pinterest, right? And so some simple ways that this can show up, kind of challenging how we look at things, is terminology. So you might be going like, oh, okay, this is what this product is called, or this is what this activity is called. And so you do all your marketing and do all your teaching, calling something, referring to something by a specific label. And when we do that, especially in search engine optimization, we tend to leave out other possibilities. So a really simple example of this is something like soda, right? Pop. Some areas call it pop. Some areas call it soda. Other people call it a fountain drink, right? Um, Other people call it Coke, right? Like I grew up and we called every soda a Coke. I want a Coke, but I wanted a Sprite, right? So it was like we just called it that. And there's a really funny George. I don't know what your leaning is, but there's a George Lopez skit where he's like pretending to be the drive-through guy at Jack in a Box and then pretending also to be the person in the drive-through, and the guy in the drive-through orders a fountain drink and the guy working at Jack in a Box doesn't understand what a fountain drink, and he's like, why you no say soda, right? And so he's like making a example of this. But the difference in terminology can mean if we are so tied to our idea of the world, our model of the world, and our one term that we use for something, we miss the opportunity to reach people who are talking about the same thing, interested in the same thing, want the same thing, but they're just using different words, right? Because we're so tied to that. And so, just a really simple example of that, like, how else can I think of this? What are other ways to refer to this? And we may not know, right? Because we know our model of the world. And so we can find these things out by having conversations with our customers, right? Having conversations with our audience. Even if we're teaching, right? Especially those of us that teach craft classes or um, marketing, business, any kind of thing that we teach, we've got to be aware that other people might have different terminology for things. Um, and so it just helps us get found better. It helps us speak to them better, right? I remember a time that this is going to be so inappropriate. I remember a time that I was teaching a craft class, or maybe I was taking it. I can't remember. But there's a tool in crafting that's called a bone folder. And what it's for is when you fold paper over, you run this like hard white plastic thing. It used to be made out of bone. Now they just make it out of plastic along the crease, and it gives a really crisp, nice crease. And I was in this class, I want to say from a stamping company demonstrator, and she was calling it a boner, and I started dying laughing because I was like, what are you talking about? And she's like, it's called a boner, and I was like, no, it's called a bone folder. And I argued with her because I needed to be right instead of just enjoying the situation of we're calling it a different thing. We were talking about the same thing. And so honoring somebody else's, respecting somebody else's model of the world can help you be a better teacher. It can help you be a better student, and help you meet people where they are. So you don't want to be missing ways to speak other people's language, right? When you when you are open to this, right, it helps us to be able to understand their issues so that we can teach them better and we can relate to each other better. And this is anything in sales too, right? A lot of sales will say, oh, you want to use the language that they use. So there's an author that I really like to follow, Mike Michalowicz, and he has a whole website and a book called The Pumpkin Plan. And in there, he talks about talking to your audience and then actually recording it like on a Zoom call. And some of you may have actually been on Zoom calls with me like this, where I recorded it because I want to know the words you used, right? Because I'm like, my idea of it isn't always right. If it was, I'd be getting all the results that I wanted, and I wasn't. So I had to start learning, like, oh, I got to look at the other words that other people use. And so I started recording what other people were saying so that I could speak to them in their language and I could better understand where they were coming from and better relate to them so that we could then solve the problem that they're having, right? The whole point of marketing is, hey, I got this thing, this is a solution to your problem. Marketing is helping you find my solution that I have for your problem, right? The other thing that happens, a real simple way, is that we are kinder teachers when we come with this understanding. We are kinder marketers. We're kinder to ourselves, and we're kinder to others. You know, I remember a time when I would be dealing with customer service thing, and I'd be really upset with the person that was supposed to be giving me the customer service. Instead of being like, well, that's their model of the world, right? And so I very much have noticed that this comes out in me being kinder to others as I am working through whatever's going on in the world. Now, here's some complex ways to use this. Your sales page. If any of you here have a sales page, let me know. Drop it in the comments. I would love to see what your guys' sales page looks like. I'm not judging it. I'm just super interested. And hey, maybe somebody will see it in the comments and then they'll like buy your thing, right? So on our sales page, right, could there be another way of thinking that your ideal customer or your ideal client has that you're not speaking to because you're not respecting other people's models of the world, right? You just might not be aware. It's not that you're a bad person, right? For me, most of my life, I just wasn't aware. Now that I'm aware of these tools, cool, I have them to use, right? Or is there something where you're like, I'm so convicted, I'm so confident, I'm so right in what I know that I'm going to speak only this way? Well, then we miss people, right? And so a lot of the time I see, or not a lot of the time, sometimes I see this kind of written off where especially people that teach marketing, will say, oh, well, they're just not your people, right? They're just not your people. You just got to be polarizing so that you can get them to go away and go to somebody else who's their flavor, right? And while I'm like, there are some people that are your flavor. Like I just bought a program from somebody that had all this 80s stuff and it was bright, really colorful marketing and really fun and sassy, and I totally loved it, right? They're totally my flavor. So there are times that is relevant. We don't want to be so convicted in being right and not honoring that we don't honor other people's model of the world, right? Because then what happens is we miss out on people that could have been our customer because we so have to be right. And I see this all the time in marketing, in my own marketing, straight up, and also in other people's marketing. I'll be like, wow, and so they're missing out. Like they have the information I need. Their product is the solution to my problem, but I just can't connect because they're not speaking my language. And so how many people are you missing out on, not because you're not their flavor, but because of not respecting their model of the world and really needing to be right? And again, like I'm saying, I've been here. This is a journey that I'm on. I'm not judging anybody at all for this. But it's more like being aware, right? So where am I making their being wrong mean that I'm right? And this happens a lot in especially in a lot of marketing where they're like, you tried this, you tried this, you tried this, and all of those were wrong. And it's just like making that person feel like they're dumb or they're wrong or they're bad in order to get them to buy your thing. There's a way to do it, right? That's kinder, that's more respecting, like, hey, you know what? This is a journey that you've been on. You're not finding the solution that you're wanting. Hey, let me help you, right? And it's just a different approach. They can probably get you better results. Um, and then also asking, like, where am I so needing to be right that I'm not seeing opportunities? And oh my gosh, this is definitely something that I have had happen that I still, I don't even want to use the word still, that I recognize occurs sometimes even now. I really want to watch my language on this. So there are times, especially when I've been at conferences and I'm speaking or I'm talking to someone or I'm doing a roundtable. Like I just did roundtables at Alt Summit last month, which was super duper fun in Palm Springs. And I'll notice that I'll want to interrupt somebody. And I'm like, oh, why can't I just give them the space to say the thing they need to say all the way? I'll be like, no, that's wrong. Or, hey, blah, 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 blah. Well, you're thinking about it in this way. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm totally doing that. I'm cutting them off, right? Interrupting. That's my needing to be right. Showing up and being like, I got to set the record straight. And I stopped listening to them a long time ago. I'm just like thinking about what I want to say back to them about how they're wrong. And I'm like, okay, hold on. So I'm missing so many opportunities because of needing to be right instead of letting them say their whole thing. And I'm like, oh, maybe. And as I've started letting people say their whole thing, I start realizing like, oh my gosh, I didn't think about it that way. Or, oh, there's this really cool thing that they were doing that I didn't even think about. Or there's this interesting situation happening that I wouldn't have heard because I was interrupting them. There's interesting situation happening that, oh my gosh, we can come up with a really cool solution for that. Or guess what? I actually have a solution for that I could sell to them or I can help them with and make some money and help them in their business. But I missed all of that because I had to interrupt and be like, blah, 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 here's all the things where I'm right, and here's all the ways where you're wrong, right? It was so tied to that. And so I was missing all of these opportunities. So kind of to wrap this up, going back to Buzz and Sheldon from the Heavyweight podcast that I listened to. Do I want to be like Buzz and Sheldon, right? Just an easy question we can ask ourselves. Do I want to be like Buzz and Sheldon and miss out on things because I'm not respecting somebody else's view because it's so much more important for me to be right? Right? No. Not like any of us would answer that and be like, no. But we in practice, right? We in practice sometimes will be doing those things. So just recognizing that and going, can I take a breath? Can I step back and ask, where are the opportunities here? Is there something I'm doing where I'm really wanting to make that other person wrong so that I can really feel like I'm right, and missing out on actually serving those people that I want to serve, whether I'm teaching them a card making class or I'm marketing to them a tool that I have that can help their business, or I'm selling them something that's going to help them have a better workout or whatever it is, right? Is there something that I'm missing because I'm not respecting their model of the world, and I'm not um, listening because I so want to make them wrong and so want to make myself right? So I hope that this was informational for you guys. I hope this was cool. I'm excited to start bringing in all these different places where I've been studying, spirituality and business and marketing and language and all these different things in my own life to help myself, and it's all kind of gelling together. It really is all the same stuff. Like, I think we like to make stuff really complicated, but I'm excited to have this space here to share with you. And I will be here every week at a regular time. I've posted it down in the caption because in case I change it, I don't want to put it on a recording. But I'm excited to share about this more. I'd love to know your questions. What do you guys want to know about? What are you struggling with in life, in business? And how can I be of service to you? All right. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you here